Alright, what is up guys, it is Storm back here with another video, and in this one I am bringing you part 24 to the new Dawn of Naruto / Boruto story. Now if you want to check this story out for yourself, the link to it will be down in the description below. But before the video begins, if you like the content you're seeing, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. I mean, they're all free, so why not? If you want some dope channel merch, the link to that will be down in the description below. And if you want to see more of me, go check out my other channels and go follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, which will all be linked down below. But without further ado, why don't we just dive right on in. Oh shit. Boruto cursed under his breath. The eyes in the darkness came closer and closer, until they were illuminated by the light of the campfire. Not that Boruto needed the light to identify their owner. There was only one person in the world who beat his sister in the terrifying eyes department. "Hi, Master Sasuke," he chirped, laughing nervously. He saw Hikari rising from her slumber and fumbling with a handful of throwing needles. As imperceptibly as possible, he shook his head and gestured with his hands. "No, fucking no, Boruto," Sasuke greeted, his tone cold and quiet. His mismatched eyes drifted upwards towards Boruto's forehead. Boruto felt his stomach fall into his boots as his master laid eyes on his defaced headband. Sasuke sighed. "I was wondering when this would happen," he said, his eyes falling back to Boruto's own. Boruto looked anywhere but his master's eyes. The Sharingan was exotic. It added a certain beauty to anyone's features. He shot many a glance at Sarada's eyes during their training that was more than just passing observation. The Rinnegan, however, was the only dojutsu more alien than the Hyugetsu Byakugan, and Sasuke used his to stare into the very soul of whoever met his gaze. At least he did it behind his hair, most of the time. "What do you mean?" Boruto asked, with a nervous, false laugh. The wind blew, revealing his master's Rinnegan in full. Boruto shivered. It felt as if Sasuke was staring through him, not at him, as if he could see his very spirit, the core of his being. It was disarming in the most uncomfortable of ways. "It was always surprising to me how our children ended up so different than we were," Sasuke said quietly. Boruto didn't know what to make of that. "Sarada reminds me of Naruto, and I see myself in you," he clarified, seeing Boruto's expression. "What happened?" Sasuke asked, in a tone that demanded an answer. Boruto considered lying. He immediately discarded that idea. His master would see right through his lies, and he had learned his lesson from fighting his dad, the Hokage. Boruto reminded himself. Not dad. There was no way he could beat him in a fight if Sasuke decided to capture him. So, he told the truth. All of it. And as he told the tale, he felt lighter than he ever had before. His cheeks grew warm as he told Sasuke, and indirectly Hikari, who was giving master and disciple their privacy by hiding in the woods, about how neglected he felt after Naruto became the 7th Hokage, about how angry he felt that Naruto would abandon his sister and mother, about how inadequate he felt in the shadow of someone as great as Naruto, about how flawed he thought their home, the Leaf, was. When he finished, he stubbornly rubbed at his eyes. He was definitely not crying, not in front of Hikari, and definitely not in front of his master. Sasuke remained quiet for a short moment. "Let me tell you a story," he said. Boruto perked up. "It is about a man who lived long ago. A man you and I have a great many things in common with. His name," Sasuke paused, "was Indra. Indra was the firstborn of a great man. He, like you and I, was naturally gifted. Anything he set his mind to, he accomplished. As he grew older, he felt no need to rely on others due to his great strength. He lived a life of solitude, pride, and independence." Boruto wondered who exactly this Indra was. He listened with rapt attention. He was determined to walk his path alone, and the only thing matched by his solitude was his power. And he did walk his path alone. "Do you know what happens next?" Sasuke asked. Boruto shook his head. "He got lost." Then Indra realized that even the strongest of men must not walk their path alone, lest they get lost in the dark, Sasuke said, smiling sadly. Unfortunately for Indra, his solitude left him with no bonds, no one he could call a friend, no one he could call family, and so he remained lost for years and years. And finally, when he found his way home, he was not the same man he was when he set out. Boruto frowned. He didn't like sad stories. The hero always won, always slayed the dragon and rescued the princess. Those were his favorite stories, the ones he read to his sister late at night. Indra returned to his family, to find that his father had chosen his younger brother to inherit his title. So lost was Indra that he attacked his brother in a fit of rage while their father lay on his deathbed. Sasuke continued on. And, in the end, brother slew brother, and both lay dead. But that wasn't enough for Indra. He continued their squabble long after he died. He and his brother were reborn, and their reincarnations were fated to battle each other for all time, his master said. There were countless such men through the ages, some of which you know, Sasuke said, giving Boruto a piercing look. Boruto's lips parted in a silent gasp as he realized what his master was saying. You mean, you're Indra? Boruto didn't necessarily believe in reincarnation. He knew the ninja temples and their monks preached about it in the Pure Lands, but not much else. The thought that he himself was some new facet of an old soul was really disturbing, to say the least. Sasuke nodded sagely. My own story would have ended up much the same as Indra's, had your father not been so... Sasuke said, fumbling for the right word. I know, Boruto said. Sasuke nodded. When I was lost, he showed me the way, he said, standing up from where he sat around the fire. Indra's path is long and dark, and you will have miles and miles to go before you sleep. Boruto pondered his master's words, watching as he stood and strode over to him. Before Boruto could react, Sasuke reached out and gently prodded him in the forehead. Boruto turned a spectacular shade of crimson. He was one of the few people alive that knew what exactly that gesture meant. He had seen Sarada and her mother receive it the few times his master had been in the Leaf. Don't get lost like I did, Boruto, Sasuke said, before he stalked into the darkness of the night. And, in the dark of the night, with only the cradle of the fire for company, Boruto knew what it meant to be loved. He laughed happily, both hands holding his forehead as if it would disappear without his grip. In the woods, Hikari smiled beneath her mask. Naruto stood, heavily bandaged, in a spacious hospital room on the highest floor of the Leaf's premier hospital. It was reserved almost exclusively for ninja of the Leaf and was personally overseen by some of the best medics they had ever trained. He himself had been on this floor of the hospital many a time. Most were because he was admitted, some because his friends were. Those were always the worst. He would rather suffer 10 of their worst injuries to spare them the most minor ones, if he could. So it was with a heavy heart that he was brought to the intensive care unit of the hospital. Naruto sighed. He had just been released the day previous, and he was already back. Gathering his courage, he knocked on the door softly. Come in, a voice called. Naruto entered and felt the icy claws of fear begin to claw at his chest. Sakura flashed him a brief, reassuring smile, as she and Tsunade labored over Yamato. The two medics, the best that had ever been born, had been called in immediately once the first responders had seen the shape of one of their Anbu's finest. And it was a good thing too. Whilst the report he received hadn't been detailed, the message had been clear. Yamato's prognosis was grim. How is he? Naruto asked quietly, for fear of waking his former teacher and longtime friend. Sakura's lips turned downwards ever so slightly, before she steeled her features. Tsunade sighed. I've done the best that I can, she said, and Naruto felt his heart beating in his throat. Sarada's reports are unclear, but whatever form of gentle fist that your son has developed is unlike anything I've ever seen. What does that mean? Naruto demanded, fear settling in. Relax, Tsunade said, waving him off. Yamato isn't going to die, but he has been scarred, quite literally. Normally, the gentle fist functions by the practitioner inserting their own chakra into the victim's pathways, and then blocks their chakra points by changing the consistency of their own chakra, so it resembles something like a tar. This, Tsunade said, gesturing at Yamato, is completely different. He's changed the very nature of the gentle fist blocking. Instead of obstructing their chakra points, Boruto temporarily numbs it with lightning chakra. Normally the body can undo blocks in their chakra points after several hours of rest. It leaves no lasting harm. With the way Boruto uses lightning chakra, the Boruto thinks its cells have been damaged. Scar tissue builds up as it naturally undoes the block. What does that mean, exactly? Naruto asked. He had never been very knowledgeable in the areas of healing, His own expertise was limited to pumping his own Yang chakra, courtesy of the Sage of Six Paths, and to someone in hoping they pulled through. It had worked for Guy, and he was on the very precipice of death. Sakura sighed. What it means is that, while Yamato will recover fully, in time, his chakra pathways have developed scar tissue. It will inhibit his natural chakra control somewhat. Certain things will be harder. Water walking, tree climbing, small precise movements. Chakra efficiency and larger scale techniques, she explained. Naruto swallowed hard. You mean, he managed to bite out, that Boruto has crippled him? Snotty shook her head. No, absolutely not. Yamato will hardly notice a difference, I think. He should be fit to return to active duty as soon as he's fully healed, she told him. But, Sakura said hesitantly, it would be extremely dangerous to be exposed multiple times to whatever Boruto's done. If Yamato were to suffer the same injury again, it could lead to a more serious loss of control over his chakra. Naruto felt the weight settle on his shoulders as the implications hit him. Naruto, Snotty said, snapping him out of his dark thoughts. Whatever jutsu Boruto has developed, it's a kinjutsu. You know that, right? Naruto nodded. He did. He himself had developed his own kinjutsu, the Rasen Shuriken, at roughly the same age. The difference was that he was a loyal ninja of the Leaf, and Boruto, as much as he hated to admit it, was a rogue ninja. Rogue ninja who knew kinjutsu were classified as S-rank criminals. Naruto released a long, ragged sigh, as Sakura wrapped him in a brief hug. Don't worry, the Anbu will find him before you have to take any drastic measures, she assured him. He nodded. Naruto wanted to believe her words so much that it hurt, but he had a bad feeling that he just couldn't shake. If Yamato couldn't restrain Boruto, along with Konohamaru and his team, then could the Anbu really hope to succeed? And if so, at what cost? Boruto had been lenient in his attacks against his team and friends. What if he didn't extend that courtesy to the Anbu? What if he took it farther and crippled them for life, if he understood Tsunade correctly? Naruto walked back to his office with his head hung. He had decisions to make. Tough ones. Ones that would have long-lasting consequences. Ones that he could not afford to make a mistake with. He collapsed into his chair and stared at his desk, and the mountains of paperwork beside it, with apprehension. For the first time since he had been inaugurated as Hokage, he regretted chasing his dream. He had dreamed, literally dreamed of having a family since he could remember. When other kids used to daydream about adventures, he daydreamed about having a family, a mother, a father, a brother or sister. As he got older, that changed to a wife and son, or daughter. He never gave voice to those dreams though. Who would want him, the orphan, the dead last, the vessel of the Nine Tails? Rude, Kurama said. Naruto chuckled under his breath. Naruto steeled his resolve. There was no other option. The alternative was too heartbreaking to imagine. Not just for him, but for Hinata and Himawari too. Bird, he called. A masked Anbu appeared in an instant. Yes sir, he spoke, kneeling. Summon Mirai Saratobi, her team, as well as Sarada Uchiha, Mitsuki, and my daughter, Naruto commanded. On second thought, summon my daughter first, then the others. Yes sir, the Anbu spoke, disappearing in a blur. Naruto didn't have to wait long. Himawari, it seemed, had already been on her way to his office. The moment she walked through the door, Naruto knew that their first words as father and daughter were going to be confrontational ones. Himawari strode up to his desk, an expression of thunderous anger marring her beauty and forcing her Byakugan active. She reached across the desk and slapped him. Naruto could have dodged. He could have blocked. It would have been trivial. The slap had been telegraphed the moment she walked in the door, but he didn't. He just took it. The sting helped him steel his resolve, even as the pain faded under the influence of Kurama. How could you? Himawari asked, her anger fading to sorrow as the tears welled in her eyes. Naruto stood and swept her in a hug as his daughter broke down and sobbed. I'm sorry, Naruto said, as Himawari cried into the crook of his neck and pounded her fist on his chest in impotent anger. So sorry, he said. He repeated his apologies over and over, like a mantra. He was vaguely aware that the rest of his guests had arrived, but his Anbu were keeping them at bay. 10 minutes later, when Himawari had exhausted her tears, Naruto let her go. He kneeled, just taller than her. I promise, he swore. Things will change. Once this tournament ends in a few weeks, I'm taking time off. I don't care if I have to drag the Fire Lord himself in to cover for me. We'll spend it together. Just us, your mother, and Boruto. Himori nodded feebly. No more long hours. No more nights spent at the office. No more missed birthdays or holidays, Naruto swore. She smiled, ever so slightly, and it made Naruto's heart burst with happiness. How are you going to get Boruto back? Himori asked, sniffling and trying to make herself look presentable. That, Naruto said, motioning for the Anbu to let his other guests in, is why you're here. Naruto watched as Himori turned and saw the number of people that had been summoned. He watched as realization slowly dawned on her. Mirai stood rigid at attention, and Naruto stifled a laugh as slowly the others mirrored her pose. He returned to his seat behind his desk, and steepled his fingers in thought as his eyes roamed over each and every member of the team he had just assembled. Naruto had vague flashbacks to a moment very similar to this, when he and his friends had gathered to retrieve Sasuke. Naruto snapped his fingers, and the walls of his office glowed blue with chakra. He had the distinct pleasure of watching the Genin, and lone Chunin he amended, looking at Shikadai, sweat. What you are about to hear is to be considered an S-class secret, he told them, watching as many audibly swallow. As you know, he said, gesturing to Mitsuki, who was still bandaged. His own wounds were not as serious as Yamato's. He hadn't even developed any scar tissue in his chakra pathways. Boruto has attacked the team that had volunteered to retrieve him, Naruto said. What many of you may not know is that Boruto has created a Kinjutsu. It is extremely dangerous, and is capable of permanently damaging your ability to manipulate chakra. Naruto saw Mirai pale, not in the fear of the jutsu itself, but because of its ramifications. What does that mean? Sarada asked, the first to find her voice. It means, Shikadai said, answering for him, that if the Hokage were to report him as a rogue ninja, he would be classified as an S-rank criminal. International law dictates that S-rank criminals be slain on sight. Leave it to Shikamaru's son to know the international law. The others predictably grew solemn. Their eyes hardened as the implications of their friend's circumstances found him. And I will report him, Naruto said carefully. He didn't miss the look of scandalized rage he received from his daughter. The Shinobi Union dictates that every Kage must report rogue operatives at our monthly summits, to prevent another Sasuke, as they've termed it. My memory, however, seems to be failing me in my old age, Naruto mused. Had the situation been less dire, they probably would have laughed. As it was, they didn't. I can forget once, but not twice, he pondered aloud. Troublesome, Shikadai said with a deep sigh. You want us to retrieve Boruto before you're forced to report him, Naruto nodded, his attention turning to Sarada. From Sarada's reports, he summarized that Boruto has, somehow, replicated a jutsu that the Raikage were feared for, a lightning release, lightning armor. With it, he's faster, stronger, and has greater reflexes, as all Raikage are, Naruto explained. However, that alone does not make it a Kinjutsu. When applied with this gentle fist, it damages the chakra point of the body irreparably. Your mission is one I do not give lightly. If I could give it to my Anbu, I would. But I fear that Boruto would cripple them without restraint. We're going, Himori demanded. She hadn't asked anyone if they wanted to go. She had just decided for the group. Naruto smiled. Not one of them had even blinked as Himori spoke what was all in their minds. He nodded. Your mission is to capture Boruto Uzumaki. You are to avoid direct combat, and instead, incapacitate him before he has the opportunity to fight back. This is an S-rank mission, the first since the end of the war. You leave tomorrow at dawn with a time limit of 2 months, and Anbu will provide each of you with the intel we have tonight, he said. There was not a hesitant face in the crowd, though several had revealed an undying determination. Sarada, Himori, Shikadai, Mitsuki. They would be the keys to this mission's success. Dismissed, Naruto said. The team disappeared in a blur, each leaving to prepare for the most important mission of their lives. Naruto could only pray for their success. Boruto grunted as he swung his machete at a particularly thorny bush. The Land of Rivers was a beautiful country, not quite as beautiful as the Land of Steam, but it was undeniably beautiful. The only problem was that it was damn nearly impossible to make any sort of good time traveling through its thick forests, deep ravines, and raging rivers. The trees were tall, towering high above the forest floor. Their branches were high and thin, making poor candidates for tree climbing like in the Land of Fire. The landscape was dotted with ravines and crevices that make every step dangerous. If you weren't paying attention, you could fall. If you were lucky, you'd fall into a dry riverbed and break your legs on the stone. If you were unlucky, you'd fall into a raging river and be swept below the water and into the vast expanse of underground caverns, never to be seen again. And it was hot. So fucking hot. The western winds from the Land of Wind blew hot, desert air inland. Boruto would find himself unbearably sweaty and covered in grains of sand. He had given up all hope of looking somewhat presentable. Not that there was anything in that damn forest to present himself to. They hadn't seen a snake. Boruto swung his machete and cut its head from its body. He watched, a little fascinated, as its body continued to wriggle and writhe after it had been decapitated. Hikari prodded him with the business end of her own machete, and the two of them continued on. They hadn't seen a soul as they continued their trek north, towards the Land of Rain. The only sign that they had made any progress was the slowly gathering storm clouds in the northern skies, pregnant with rain. I hate this. Boruto tumbled forward, panic causing his heart to flutter as he feared the worst. He fell, tumbling into a depression in the land. He rolled through thorny bushes, and tried his best to avoid tree trunks on his way down. When he stopped, he was covered in leaves, grass, and sticks. Boruto shook as he sat in the basin, his rage building and building and building. I fucking hate this country, Boruto screamed, as loud as he could. If an Anbu patrol found him now, it would be their funeral. Their fault too. They should know not to challenge an angry Uzumaki. Seething, Boruto stood and kicked a tree trunk. He hissed, leaping back and holding his foot as he stubbed his toe in the bark. Lashing out, he spat a blade of water that cut deep into the forest. He grinned in satisfaction, as part of the forest bowed before him. A light, slitting giggle drew Boruto's attention. His head snapped to Hikari, who looked as cold and disciplined as ever. It's not funny, Boruto screamed. From the way her eyes shined behind her mask, she thought otherwise. Boruto's chest heaved as he breathed in and out deeply. Who puts a damn bull in the middle of this fucking wasteland? He grumbled. His anger activated his Byakugan. He looked down. What had once been what he assumed a cave had collapsed. The earth had fallen with the cave, creating a large bowl. Nature had emerged victorious, as it always has, and reclaimed it. Trees and grass and bushes had filled it in, making it as the deadly vicious trap it was, at least in Boruto's mind. Boruto turned about to continue on, when he caught something in the distance. A flash of red paint. Perhaps the cave had been something other than natural. He dashed off in pursuit of his curiosity. He laughed as he weaved between the trees, hearing Hikari sigh behind him. She had grown used to his eccentricities, if not accommodated to them on occasion. Boruto came to the edge of a cliff that fell for hundreds of feet into a deep ravine. At the bottom, a river raged. It bellowed white froth as the waves churned and disappeared into a sheer face of rock. Boruto knew that if somehow the river swept him away, then he would drown in the underwater cavern systems. Still, he saw the object of his fascination. A tall, rotten wooden gate. It had been painted red at one time, but now only a few specks of paint remained. Interesting, Hikari commented next to him. Boruto didn't notice her approach. Even in the god-forsaken forest, she was as silent as a spirit. Boruto's eyes narrowed as he spotted a series of narrow stairs, hewn into the stone that led down to the river. He flashed Hikari a boyish smile, the one he knew she would indulge him with. Let's explore, Boruto proclaimed, quickly scampering down the stairs. They were steep, almost vertical. Boruto had heard the expression climbing stairs before. In this case, it was rather literal. The rock was slick with the spray of water and various moss and lichen that had taken to calling the stairs home. With a liberal use of chakra, Boruto managed to cling to the rock. He imagined that if a civilian had discovered the cave, they would have slipped and fallen to their death. The two of them reached the bottom, where it appeared the debris of the collapsed cave had been vomited from the cavern entrance. It gave them an excellent, and more importantly, safe spot to explore. With his Byakugan, Boruto explored the cave. It must have been a sight to behold. The main atrium would have been at least 100 feet tall, with branching, smaller caverns. Boruto could see that at one point, the river had flown into the cave, creating an inlet of water. Perhaps it had been a shrine? He scoured the cave's ruins, looking for an altar or some sort of religious artifact. He found none. Looking deeper, however, revealed something much more interesting. Tunnels. There are tunnels underneath the rubble, Boruto informed Hikari, who looked exceedingly bored. To be fair, she didn't have the Byakugan. Upon closer inspection, the tunnels weren't just tunnels. Well, they were, but they weren't empty. There were what appeared to be crates and racks. Boruto's curiosity gnawed at him. "We can take a short break, can't we?" Boruto begged. To be honest, if he had to hack his way through more jungle, he'd probably attempt to throttle Hikari. He couldn't take it anymore. Hikari sighed audibly. Fine, she relented. Boruto smiled, and with a flair for the dramatic, flourished his hands and produced a large brush and a jar of ink. He could practically see because, well, through some miracle, the Hunter core mask obstructed the Byakugan's vision. Hikari's eyebrows raised in interest. Boruto began to happily dab his brush in his ink and paint the rocks blocking the entrance to the cave. He hummed a merry tune as he went about his work, channeling chakra into the seal in making. "What are you doing?" Hikari asked. "I've been working on a new seal," Boruto explained happily. "You see, common explosive tags are really just highly concentrated chakra contained into a flimsy piece of paper. It's the seal itself that changes that chakra into the explosion. But, you see, the explosive tags resemble fire release more than explosion release. All fire and no bang. This," he said, gesturing to his scrawled seal, "is my attempt at the explosion release tag." Hikari began to crawl back up the stairs with haste. "It's perfectly safe, don't worry," Boruto called out, his voice echoing through the ravine. "The last time you were working on a new seal, you set the gallery on fire," Hikari yelled. "The cook nearly put you in the soup that night, remember?" Boruto did. For an old, retired ninja, the man's skill with the cleaver had been frightening. His favorite tale had been how, in his early days of service, a prisoner of war from the Hidden Stone had complained about his cooking. As the cook told it, he stormed into the gallery and scalped the man right there and then. No one ever said a word about his cooking after that, even when he served them dog shit for dessert after a spectacularly failed mission. A bitter taste soured in Boruto's mouth at the memory that the cook had died when the bastards from Cloud had attacked them. A small part of Boruto hoped that, of all the people that would be hunting him, Samui and Atsui would be the first to find him. He would take a great joy in sending them to the Pure Lands, just like they did to his comrades. Boruto leapt up to where Hikari was on the steps. She grabbed onto him, holding him steady as he formed the ram hand seal. "Seal. Release," Boruto whispered. His eyes closed in a silent prayer. Nothing happened. "Huh?" Boruto muttered as Hikari released him. He wandered back down the steps ever so carefully to inspect his work. An explosion rocked the ravine. "Holy shit," Boruto swore, as the seal detonated and brought down some of the cliff above them. As one, Boruto and Hikari wove hand seals. Water release, water bullet jutsu, was one of the staples of any water jutsu user. They shot falling rocks as they fell, destroying them or knocking them away. When the final rock had fallen and the debris cleared, Boruto admired his work with pride. "I thought you said it worked," Hikari said, her voice terse. Boruto chuckled nervously. "I said I was working on it," he countered. "Besides, it did work." And it had. The cavern had been cleared of enough debris to access the tunnel that led far beneath the earth into where, Boruto hoped, riches lay in waiting. An old buried treasure of gold. A cache of weapons, armor, and supplies from the wars and ages past? Who knew? Together the two of them proceeded into the depths. Boruto with his Byakugan, and Hikari with the torch she had produced from his storage scroll. It took them nearly 2 hours to get to the end of the tunnel. It was hard going. The rock was slick with dripping water, and hanging rock formations forced them to squeeze through at certain points. But they made it. The tunnel faded away to a small cavern, no larger than a house. Hikari held up a torch, casting light. Boruto frowned. Some of the stuff was almost new. Well, not new, but recent. It wasn't some lost treasure. He sighed, and strode for the first thing he saw. A raised stone with a book resting atop it. He carefully checked for traps, and after 30 minutes of debate with Hikari, deduced that it was safe enough to take. Boruto blew the dust from its surface, and found that it was a leather-bound book of some kind. There was no title. He cracked open the first page. The paper had turned brittle and yellow with age, but was still legible. Boruto read aloud, for Hikari's benefit. "It must seem silly that a woman my age would write a journal. I know even I sometimes question my sanity in these dark days. Maybe I am going insane, reverting to childhood mannerisms to cope. Well, in any case, my death is fast approaching. I am no fool. I know that with my ascension to Amikage, he shall come to put an end to me, and to desecrate the corpse of one of the few people I have ever loved. That I cannot allow to pass, and yet, pass it shall. I know that I am no match for him, if he is who he says he is, but I shall not die quietly, or easily. If this is to be my end, then it will be his as well. My greatest fear is that, should I fall, my country will never know peace. It is my hope, if you are reading this, that somehow he has been defeated. If he has, then no doubt the name of our country's greatest hope for peace would be marred and sullied beyond recognition. And truthfully, it should be. I've killed so many men in the pursuits of a bloody peace for an even bloodier country, more often with word than deed, but killed all the same. History may hate us, but they shall never forget our name. Let me tell you a story. The story of a little girl and two little boys who thought they could bring an end to the bloody rain that falls eternal. Let me tell you the story. Boruto trailed off, his eyes widening, of the Akatsuki.